Hello everyone. In this video we are going to discuss one of the important concepts, that is the land reforms before independence or the land reforms prior to independence period. We all know what are land reforms, but while studying we forget to learn the basics. So make sure you learn the basics. Let's understand the term land reform. The term land reform can be understood as the reforms made by the government to make changes for the improvement in land and in land laws. So for the betterment of land reform, the new land laws are enacted and the existing laws are modified. In order to understand the present state of land reforms and the land administration, it would be necessary to have a look at the historical background of the same in India. The land reforms before the independence period can be studied in the following phrased manner. The first is the establishment of British Empire in India. In the 16th century, the Britishers came to India for carrying on trade activities in the name of East Indian Company. Later, the British businessmen had gradually diverted their interest from trading to ruling India. As a result, the Britishers were able to establish their sovereignty over its subcontinent. The Anglo-French Wars and the battles of Plassey and Boxer resulted the conquest of India by the British. By 1850s, the Britishers conquered whole of the India. The second is the enforcement of doctrine of lapse. Considered it is a type of policy through which the Britishers were able to establish the British rule in India. The doctrine of lapse envisages a situation in which the ruler of the protected state dies without a natural heir. His state was not to be passed to his adopted heir unless such adoption has been approved by the British authorities. Otherwise, it was to be annexed to the British Empire. As a result, many of the empires such as Jhansi, Nagpur, Sata were annexed to the British Company between 1848 to 1854. The third is the system of dual government. East India Company in India acquired the supreme control over Bengal in 1765, and it was said that the dual government envisaged a situation where a company officials had a power without responsibility, whereas the Indian officials had a responsibility without power. So the company officials had power, but Indian officers, they don't have any power but have the responsibility, whereas Indian officials only had responsibility but the British authorities did not give them power to use. Therefore, the Regulating Act 1773 was brought into force in order to regulate the company's affair. It also created some problems. As a result, the Pitt's India Act was passed in 1784, which could bring the changes in the governance East India Company. And here we are starting about the land tenures or the intermediaries. So in fact, the starting point of discussion of the land reforms is always the land revenue. This system of land taxation and state rents developed first by Hindu rulers, adapted and centrally organized by the Mughals, and finally elaborated by the Britishers to transfer a certain fixed part of the land produce to the ruler. Zamindari system or the permanent settlement. During the British government, the revenue collection was made directly through cultivators or indirectly through the intermediaries such as zamindars on the commission basis. These intermediaries were the collectors of revenue, though they did not own any land in their revenue jurisdiction. During the time of Lord Cornwallis, a 10-year settlement was introduced in 1793. It was known as the Zamindari settlement, a permanent settlement. Under this system, the zamindars were declared as the owners of the land as long as they paid the revenue to the East India Company. These zamindars acted as the agent of the government for the collection of revenue from the cultivators. The amount of land revenue that zamindars had to pay was fixed. This system was first introduced in the provinces of Bengal and Bihar. The amount of land revenue that zamindars had to pay was fixed. The amount would be divided into level parts. 10/11 of the share belongs to East India Company or the British authorities. 1/11 of the share belongs to the zamindars. Here the British government had no direct contact with the cultivators, and the zamindars were known as the intermediaries. After the permanent settlement is the Rayatwari settlement. The Rayatwari settlement was introduced by Thomas Munro and the Captain Reed in year 1820. This system was initially introduced in Madras and Bombay provinces. Under the system of settlement, the right of ownership was handed over to the peasants. The government collected revenue directly from the peasants. Here there is no intermediaries. Under the Rayatwari settlement, there is no intermediaries. The British government collected revenue directly from the peasants or the cultivators. The term Rayat means the peasant or the farmer who cultivates in the land. Initially, one half of the estimated produce was fixed as the rent. This assessment was reduced to 1/3 of the produce by the Thomas Munro. The position of cultivators became more secure under the settlement. In this system, the settlement was made between the government and the ryots. Ryot means the farmer or the cultivator. This system was revised for every 20 to 30 years when the revenue demand was arbitrarily raised. In most of the areas, the land revenue fixed was excessive and the ryots were hardly left with the bare maintenance. Even under the system, the government exploited the farmers and peasants. Next is Mahalwari system. Lord William Benedict suggested the changes in Mahalwari settlement in year 1833. Under this system, assessment of revenue was to be made on the basis of estimated produce of a mahal or a village. The whole village is treated as a unit as far as the land revenue is concerned. Village headman was required to pay the revenue. This system was made village-wise or mahal-wise. The responsibility of collecting the land revenue of the village headman. The Mahalwari system is also known as the modified version of Zamindari system, which benefited the upper class in the villages. Under this, the burden of heavy taxation finally fell on cultivators. They had to seek help from the moneylenders who became rich and acquired the lands from the peasants. The next is revenue policies. The British introduced a new form of right of private property in land. Accordingly, the land would be subject to the sale, mortgage, or other form of alienation with a view to protect the government's revenue. The peasants could sell or mortgage their land to clear the government dues. Here, the next is the land acquisition. In order to regulate the law relating to the acquisition in India, the first step taken by the Britishers in India was Bengal Regulation Act of 1824. It was governing all the provinces and controlled by the presidency of Fort William. It provided provisions for enabling the officers of the government to acquire at the fair valuation or other immovable property required for road, canals, or other purpose. After this, the Bengal Regulation Act of 1824, many laws relating to the land acquisition were made. Under the Land Acquisition Act of 1894, the clear procedure was provided for the acquisition of land and determination of compensation. The Land Acquisition Act 1894 was even in force after the independence. These laws provided provisions for the government to acquire the land and other immovable property for the public person. Previously, many laws were made by the statute, but later the Land Acquisition Act 1894 was in force even after the Indians' independence. In this, you can also include about the reorganization of British administration, in which the revolt of 1857 made the task of organization of British Empire in India. Under the Act of 1858, the administration of India was transferred from East India Company to the British Crown. In 1876, the Queen Victoria assumed the title of Empress of India to establish the British sovereignty over the entire India. And next is absentee landlordism. Absentee landlordism is a situation where the real landlord will not have any rights to enjoy the fruits of their land. The reason for this situation include the fact during those days peasants were subject to the triple burden, namely by the government, the zamindar landlord or money lenders. The peasants suffered from deepening poverty and high taxation. The reason is the high revenue. The reason is the burden of heavy taxation on the cultivators. Here, the peasants were burdened with the taxation. Due to the tax burden, people suffered in poverty and burdened with the debts. They had to seek help from moneylenders who became rich and acquired their lands from the peasants. So, this established the situation of absentee landlordism. In the concept of land reforms before independence, you must include how Britishers entered India and the land revenue policies under British, also about intermediaries and about the land acquisition. These were the policies implemented during the British rule and they are land reforms. And you must include these topics in this answer. And also you can include about Jagir. Who are Jagirdars? Let me tell you a few points about the Jagir. The term Jagir denotes land. It is an institution originated during the Muhammadian period. The Jagir was a tenure of land under the Muslim rulers in which the public revenues of a given piece of land were made over to a servant of a state with the powers to collect and appropriate such revenue and administer the general government of the district. The person whom the Jagir was given was called as Jagirdar, and he exercised all the rights in respect of Jagir assigned to him. A Jagir was a primarily a grant after the life of a Jagir was primarily a grant of land here the administrative authority of Jagir was called as Jagirdar. And also you can include about Inam or Inamdar. Let's let me tell you few points about this concept also. Inam is a gift. Inam means gift. Inam is a gift. Inam means a gift of immovable. Inam means it is a gift. Inam means a gift of immovable property. Immovable. Inam means a gift of immovable property given by the ruler or the government with or without any condition of service. These land could be exempted from the payment of land revenue. The person who receives the land who receives this is the person who receives is as the inamdar. The person who receives is as the inamdar. The inamdar is one of the intermediaries. So earlier the kings, emperors, nizam, landlords used to give the lands to the people who have done services to them. Such lands were called as inam lands. They are gifted lands. And the person whom the inam is given is known as inamdar. Mostly the concept of inam and inamdar were in South India during the during the rule of Nizam. This concept has its origin during the Nizam's period. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, comment below saying that you did. If you have any questions, doubts or suggestions, leave that in comment section. And if you have not subscribed yet, consider subscribing.